This game is an example of why you should always defend tenaciously in worse positions. I was playing black against Igor Goldenberg, who was a FIDE Master at the time of this game and is now an international master. I had been struggling from a considerably inferior position since the early middle game, but I have managed to defend up to move 64. Even though I was sure I had a losing position a couple of moves ago. My opponent now played Rook f7. What do you think is the strongest move here? Please pause the video and try to find the best continuation. In fact, Rook f7 was a blunder. My opponent, who had been playing quite accurately up to this stage, should have continued bishop d6 with a plan similar to what he employed in the game. However, after Rook f7, black has a tactic, and the move here is Rook takes e5 check, which liquidates into a drawn endgame. After d takes e5, black plays d4 check with a double attack on the king and the rook. And here all the variations lead to a draw. If white plays bishop takes d4, black takes on f7, king e4, king g6, bishop e3, bishop c4, and the king will head to this e8 square, where it will not need to move for the rest of the game, and then black simply moves his bishop back and forth, and white will not be able to make progress. Another move would have been king e4, which is slightly more devious, but it doesn't win because bishop takes f7, and now white has nothing. There's no entry squares, so white has nothing better than bishop takes d4, king g6, bishop c5, bishop c4, with the same idea of putting the king on e8. White could also take the pawn with the king, bishop takes f7, bishop e7 check, king f5, and here black defends easily in time because white can't go for the other black b pawn because king takes e5, king takes b5, black will play bishop d5, and then he'll sacrifice his bishop for white's pawn, and it'll be a draw. So after bishop e7 check, king f5, white can't make progress, and if he doesn't go for the pawn on b5, black will simply play his bishop to c4 and move his king to e6 with a similar idea to before, and he'll just move his bishop back and forth on this diagonal. Okay, unfortunately I missed all this and instead played king g6, which though is a blunder because it misses the best move, what was easily the best move. White's job is still not easy, but in this sort of situation he has good practical chances to wear me down because the rook is a terrible blockader of a pawn. Much better blockaders are knights and sometimes bishops. Generally the pieces that are worth less tend to be better blockaders. Also the rook is pretty immobile, and white will eventually be able to get his king through via the king side, assuming black plays some inaccurate moves. Rook d7 followed, king f5, rook f7 check, and now I played king g6. Better would have been king g4, which claims slightly more space on the king side. Bishop d6, king g5, bishop c7, rook e8, and probably black has good chances to draw, although white can still try to throw some tricks into the position. Instead I played king g6, my opponent played rook f8, king g5, bishop d6, bishop b3, bishop c7, and here I moved my rook out of the blockading position by playing rook c6. I think I was just trying to gain some activity, maybe perhaps down the c file, or maybe coming here to attack the pawn. But probably in the long term black will do better by keeping the rook on the e file. So my opponent continued bishop d8 check, king g6, king f4, and now he's slowly inching forward with his forces. Bishop c2, bishop e7, and now I really should have played rook e6, putting the rook back onto the e file. And now after bishop c5 my opponent is winning, but potentially there are some still chances to defend. Instead I played rook c7 attacking the bishop, and now white plays rook f6 check, and this forces my king back even further. If king h5, probably white will play bishop f8, and now he's threatening rook h6 checkmate. I'll probably have to defend against that, and he'll be able to march his forces forward. So this forces my king back even more, and now bishop f8 check, king g8 e6, and white is completely winning here, but I decided to play on a couple more moves because potentially there are still some tricks black can employ. Rook c8, bishop c5, rook e8, king g5, king g7 e7, and now the pawn is very close to queening, and here my opponent shows the strategy white should use to win this position. Bishop b1, bishop d6, bishop e4, rook f8. Obviously I can't take the rook because white will take back with check and make a queen, and the bishop defends the queening square. Bishop g6, bishop e5 check, king h7, bishop f6, and here black is in zugzwang. Any move he makes will lose material. I played bishop h5, and according to the record of the game I resigned here after king takes h5, but in hindsight I probably should have tried one more trick as a final result. Black can actually try two tricks here, the first of which is rook takes f8, and here queen takes f8 or rook takes f8 will lead to stalemate, and which is an immediate draw. So white has to play either make a new bishop or preferably a new knight with check, and white will win this endgame. The other trick I could have employed was rook a8, and here white can't play rook takes a8 because then it'll be stalemate and to draw. So white's best line here is the forcing line rook h8 check. Black has no other move except to take the rook. Bishop takes, king takes, and now white plays king g6, sealing off the king squares. And after king g8, e8 queen is checkmate. But it was probably worth trying those tricks, just making the most of black's resources. Because occasionally an opponent will fall for such a trick, and it's a perfectly good way to save a losing position. Anyway, that was all I was going to show in this video, so thanks for watching.